So as you all know, this little video that we're doing right now is just for the friends of Brian. And Brian reviewed some of the video that we did previous to this recording right now, and basically he said, not good enough. You really need to explain to the people who are going to be watching this what is so particularly important about developing this unusual database. So let me backtrack a minute to be sure you understand the whole picture of what's really going on here. So COVID hits the world. We're in the midst of this pandemic, and we're seeing patients that have so many different symptoms that it's hard to figure out what's going on. Ends up, of course, is that this disease isn't so much about the virus itself, but about the spike protein that can, in fact, detach from the virus and is in of itself toxic and can hit any different physiological system in the body. In fact, not only can it hit any different physiological systems, it can hit all of them. And therefore, there are over 200 different symptoms that are now cataloged and associated officially with the COVID-19 illness or syndrome. This becomes even more complicated, of course, when you include into the equation the mRNA vaccines, which cause your body to make its own spike protein. So therefore, even people who never had COVID but have had the mRNA vaccine, Pfizer's or Moderna, now they have spike protein that their body made, and they keep on getting boosters, and the spike protein hangs around for months and months, etc. And you have long-haul COVID, vaccine-injured COVID, all sorts of different things associated with the spike protein that can hit any and all of the physiological systems in your body. So we have 200 different symptoms. Now, it so happens that in our practice, we specialize in a very advanced form of integrative and regenerative medicine. And so we have here various modalities that allopathic medicine is really unfamiliar with. I mentioned 5 earlier, but really there are 6 of them. So I'm not going to go into depth about the 6 modalities because we've done lots of other videos about them. Very, very interesting stuff. Now, early on, we realized that the modalities that we use are really effective on all forms of the spike protein illness, whether, again, it's from the virus itself or from the vaccines or long haul. Incredibly effective, far more effective than what the allopathic doctors and institutions use with repurposed medications. No, those repurposed drugs are also effective, and I don't want to throw any of the baby with the bathwater, but these other modalities that we use are incredibly effective. The issue is, if you have 200 different symptoms and you have a half a dozen different modalities that work, it's a soup that's so complicated that it's hard to tell which modality has been the most effective on which patient, because each patient presents differently. It depends which of their symptoms comes from which of the systems that has been hit, or which system has been hit the hardest. And so everyone's symptomology can vary from patient to patient, and you don't know exactly which of the modalities that we are using are the most effective for this particular patient. And there are no labs that tell you what to do. Therefore, this becomes a real puzzle. You have to treat the patient with a particular modality, or a sequence of modalities, or a combination of modalities, and then watch them day by day, observe them day by day, see how they are changing, and customize and modify the protocol that you're using on them to increase the effectiveness of what you're doing until they're out of the woods and climbing the mountain of health and vitality once again. But it's a case-by-case basis. It requires a huge amount of observation, and it is, in fact, the essence of functional medicine. We are simply analyzing how the patient is functioning, what their symptoms are doing based on the protocols and the modalities that we're using. But this is complicated. And it's so complicated that it takes a long time to figure out. Now, this isn't a problem that just us that practice integrative and regenerative medicine are having. Also, the allopathic physicians are having the same issue. In the last meeting with the dozen or so clinical scientists that are on the inner circle of the FLCCC, someone else brought up the same thing, that we know which of the repurposed medications are working, but we can't tell exactly which one we should give to which patient and in which sequence and in which dosing, et cetera, et cetera. It's such a complicated soup. There's so many ingredients in there that if the soup tastes bad or bitter, you don't know which ingredient did it. And so you have to somehow be able to take out all the variables, and there are so many variables, in order to figure out really a more direct, a more precise, a more predictable way to treat these patients. And again, we've never had an illness, never had a disease like the spike protein disease, again, from the vaccines or whether from the virus itself. So it occurred to me along the way, and working with our team here at AMA, Regen Medicine and Skincare, that what we need is a database that can do this analysis for us. The human mind simply can't deal with that many variables. We need something that can look at this very complicated soup and figure it out. In fact, the metaphor we use instead of soup is the Gordian knot. And I hope you're all familiar with the Greek mythology around the Gordian knot and Alexander the Great. This is a huge, complicated rope that's knotted in so many different ways. We have to be able to untangle it to see what's really going on. And so this database that we conceived of, and I shared this with the FLCCC, is one that is based on matrices. Imagine a list of all 200 of the different symptoms. And then imagine another list on another axis, which lists all the different modalities that we use. And then perhaps another list of all the repurposed medications that can be used. And then a way to input on a daily basis, and this is something that the patients do on a daily basis, to input where they're at with their different symptoms. So let's say brain fog. They start with us with a brain fog at 10 out of 10. They can't think straight. And then 2 days later, it's now a 9 out of 10. And then 2 days later, a 7 out of 10. And then we changed their protocol and it went back up to an 8 out of 10. Anyhow, it's a way for the patients on a daily basis to score their symptoms. And so what you end up with is for each of the symptoms, you have the input on a daily basis of the patients. So you have matrices. This is a matrix layered upon a matrix, layered upon a matrix, layered upon a matrix. You can go as deep as you need to. It's a multi-dimensional matrix that's tracking all the symptoms and all the different modalities that we input, because we're the ones giving them the treatments, and also the medications that they're taking at home. And all this goes into the database, and the whole database, all the different matrices, are grown out of an AI substrate, right? And a machine learning, an artificial intelligence substrate through which we can query the entire system of data in order to distill out of that morass, to distill out of that Gordian knot the patterns that are beginning to emerge that tell us that this symptom and this modality, or this particular group of symptoms, if a patient comes in with this group of symptoms, that this combination of modalities is going to be the most effective. This is something that our minds can't handle, but a database, as I just described to you, can. And let me tell you, the FLCCC guys got very, very excited about it. And in fact, Dr. Pierre Corey, who's the founder of the group, the most published critical care physician in history, his words, I think I'm paraphrasing, but I might be actually getting it exactly as he said it, would be the single most important development in history in the advance of the science of functional medicine. There is no labs. Therefore, we have to figure out what's going on with these patients by actually analyzing what's happening. And the only way we can do that is with a database, a multi-dimensional matrices of data based on the symptoms and the symptomology and the modalities and the daily scoring to see what's actually going on and how do we treat these patients as they occur to us one at a time with a customized protocol. This database is, well, in our opinion, going to solve the spike protein diseases. But it's not just for the spike protein and COVID. It truly can be used literally on any illness, any disease. The more complex, the better. And God knows there are a lot of illnesses and diseases out there that we're just nipping at the edges, trying to figure out what's going on with them. And this kind of analysis can be used literally in every element of medicine. This is exciting. This is incredibly exciting. And we need help. We need help putting it together because it's expensive. And as I think I mentioned earlier in the video, even though this is proprietary, even though the ownership of this, will be held here, we're not going to sell it. We're going to keep it as an open source so that physicians all around the world can use it to help the clinical outcomes with their patients, regardless of how complicated the patients present. So there's going to be no money made from this, but it is expected to change the world of medicine, of clinical medicine. And we need financial help to get the work done. So friends of Brian tells me you're the type of folks who will look at something like this and basically say, you had me at hello. I hope that's true.